I think things like moving to social, moving to digital, making sure that you're thinking about, your marketing technology and your analytics differently. All of those things we have thought about over the past several years, but now we suddenly are taking on, um, hyper importance because we're evolving, really quickly. I mean, I think some of the biggest impact I've seen, frankly, are on event roles and content roles.
This episode is brought to you by Postal.io, a sales and marketing engagement platform that generates leads, increases sales, and improves customer retention. Learn how you can integrate direct mail and gifting into your existing strategy by visiting Postal.io. Hey there, I'm Bernie Borges, Chief Customer Officer at Vengreso, the leader in digital sales transformation. I'm also the host of this show, the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. On this podcast, I showcase B2B marketers in the trenches, showcasing strategies and tactics that are working for them in their modern marketing journey. Be sure to listen to the end of each conversation for my summary and takeaway, as well as the closing message. And now, here's this week's Modern Marketer. Welcome to episode 287. Hey, my guest this week is Sara Larsen. Sara is a B2B marketing executive with experience in software and services, leading in organizations including IBM, SAP, and Dassault Systems. Now, Sara was most recently CMO at Brightcove, the leading online video streaming platform. Sara, welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Bernie, thank you so much for having me here today.
Absolutely. I'm really excited about our topic. Our listener doesn't know about all the planning that goes into this, but we have got a great topic planned. And we're going to be talking about some of the modern marketing success pillars that you've applied in your career, but really how we've had to pivot and how you're applying those in 2020. So I'm excited to talk about that. But of course, let's kind of tee up the context here, Sara. You have a very impressive marketing background. So why don't you, for the listener, just give an overview of sort of your career history before we dive into these marketing pillars and how you've pivoted.
That sounds good, Bernie. Whenever people say impressive marketing background, I always think that means I must have a lot of scars from the different things I've gone through
You
with
do, don't you?
myself. And I do. I've had some really great experiences in marketing transformational roles at IBM. I was there about 6 years. SAP. Was there about 8 years, Dassault Systems, and most recently at Brightcove. And really, one of the things that I've seen across my career is being involved in transformation. And sometimes that's planned, new
Right.
markets, new products, and sometimes it's not planned. Having lived through things like, 9/11, the economic crisis in 2008. And I think now we all are sort of adding to our transformational list living through COVID as
Right.
marketers and figuring out how to navigate that. So I'm excited to share a little bit of the insight that I'm seeing in the market around some of the pivots that people are making and what we should do next.
Yep. Yep. Well, let's get to it. I know you've got three specific pillars that you want to dive into. So why don't we start with your first one?
Great. Well, first, I want to talk about the word pivot because we've all used it. I think everyone has a list of what are the words you didn't think you were going to use in
Hmm.
2020 so much, and pivot is on that list, I think, for most of us. And it's really a change to ensure short term survival and also support long term resilience and growth. And I think a lot of us have gone through that first part, which is the short term survival. And now we need to be thinking about long term, what do we need to do to survive and continue to grow. And probably the number one thing I'm seeing around the initial pivot and what to think about next is, are you relevant? Is your product or service now relevant? And with whom? What buyers are you targeting? And do they potentially have different needs? And so that's a trend I think a lot of folks went through in the sort of early days of COVID. Is the thing that I'm marketing and selling still relevant? And maybe there's different people that now need it or need it in a different way. So I think that's, one question. We went through that in the video space. Video was relevant, so check. But the people who were now looking at video were thinking about using it in different ways, and there were different personas. A good example is, we traditionally sell in the enterprise to IT or sales and marketing. A new persona came onto the scene, the chief security officer. And that became really an important role because they were managing the business continuity plan. And so
Hmm.
some of the needs around video changed. And so we needed to think about the language, we need to think about packaging, we need to think about different pricing models. So, that's one example I've seen. I've heard countless examples from other organizations that are learning fast and thinking about, their product pivot. So, I
So
think
how does that actually happen though? Because you don't go into a conference room and just walk out 3 hours later and say, okay, we've got a pivot strategy, right?
Well, I think a big piece is you have to listen. You really have to listen to your customers. You have to listen to your sales organization. What conversations are they having or are they not having, right? So if you're traditionally engaged with a particular persona and all of a sudden they can't talk to you or don't want to talk to you, you've fallen down on the list of priorities. So where in the organization are you now a priority? And so part of that active listening is really important. I think for us, we saw the notion of business continuity becoming very important. And so the idea of video as something for communications or for sales and marketing, it was now being talked about as business continuity. And so that's a different language, it's a different way to package and price. And it's a different person that we had to talk to. So now we had to go do research on that person. We had to understand what motivated them. We had to find them, right? So the data to reach them, and then put programs around that persona to make sure that you're, covering that base.
So it has far-reaching implications on how you actually, once those decisions get made, how you actually implement them. Because we're
Hmm.
talking not just marketing and sales, but service and customer success
Hmm.
and
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it really
everything.
goes. Yeah, it goes to a couple of things. One, are you aligned with sales? So most marketers would say, yes, I'm aligned with sales. Are you also aligned with product? So product sales and marketing have to be aligned, and you have to be thinking jointly about go to market. So, what are you selling? What are you selling right now? To whom? And how are you bringing it to market? And marketing can help lead that conversation, but you've got to have sales and market. You've got to have product and sales in the boat with you to really make those fast pivots, or else it just becomes kind of a campaign and
Right.
not a real product that's going to meet a whole customer need in the market. So,
Right.
I did see some, very early on in COVID, some hesitation to be too opportunistic, right? So marketers like, should we talk about our product and service in a different way? Is it going to be ambulance chasing, right? And
Mm.
and the reality is, it's our job as marketers to be looking at the market and to be leading our organizations with that insight. So if we're seeing something, say something, and help your organization make that pivot around a new product, around a new service, around a new persona, and lead. And so I think that's a role that a lot of marketers have been sort of thrust into very quickly. And those that are making that pivot long term will start to see traction on that.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the impact on the account-based strategy approach?
Hmm. Yeah, so that's a little bit of the now what, right? So you've made the pivot. Now you need to think about what else do you need to sustain this for the long term. Beyond things like ensuring you've got good, product packaging and pricing DNA in your organization, you've got to be doing things like investing in market research, investing in customer feedback, investing in competitive research, because you're not pivoting in a vacuum. Your competitors are as well. And so make sure that in your organization, those things are continued, that they're continuing and that they're continuing to get investment. I know there's a lot of pressure in the marketing organization right now. There's a tendency to probably, move budget into demand gen, but don't forget about funding some of those upstream activities around market research, because ultimately, if you have an account based strategy, you have to have those insights. You
Hmm.
have to know what customer set you're going after, what persona you're going after, and why. And marketing and sales have to jointly understand that. So that foundational research in the market is really, really important.
So you know the old cliche, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And so what I hear you saying is that really to have an effective account-based strategy, you've got to do the research first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that goes to the market opportunity, that goes to the type of buyers, that goes to what they want to buy or what they should buy based on what the market needs might be. Another place to really look for that insight is within, your own customer family. So if you don't have a customer advisory board, I would say start one. If you do have a customer advisory board, use it. A lot of times, customer advisory boards have tended to be annual meetings, in person, and they are very nice events. I think now that we're in a virtual world, we have a lot more choices on how
Mhm.
to have those types of interactions. And I do really encourage people to kind of think about bringing a couple of voices into their advisory board, both the user perspective as well as an executive and line of business buyer. So, really encourage you to think about investing in customer advisory board if you don't have one today.
Excellent. All right, you want to get to number two?
Number two, the marketing mix has fundamentally changed. I don't think any marketer is surprised by that one. I think we all woke up in March and had to cancel events. We had to change different ways that we were addressing the market, and it didn't happen slowly, right? I mean, it happened. I think we all can point to the day on our calendar, even probably the moment, and time
Yeah,
of day that it
yeah,
happened.
exactly.
And if you were to say, we're going to take a quarter of your budget and a big piece of your expectation on pipeline creation and just it evaporates overnight, you go into a little bit of a survival mode. So I think that first pivot was really around events in the marketing mix. There's been an incredible amount of innovation that's happened in the past few months around the
Mhm,
event space.
mhm.
You've been going, I'm sure, to different virtual events and you're seeing it, right? Real time?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we were talking offline, I had the privilege of speaking at 2 conferences, Inbound and Content Marketing World, both of which were, of course, in years past, big events with 20,000 people, and this year it was 100% virtual, and I spoke at both of them, and it was just very different experience, a good experience, Sarah,
Hmm.
but very different. And the
Hmm.
innovation that I've seen in both of those events and a few others has been really impressive and really, breath of fresh air.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get that question all the time. When are events going to come back? Like they're going to come back, but it's going to be different because we have different expectations.
Yeah.
The
So
a
when are
lot
they
of
gonna
the
come back, by the way?
when are they going to come back? Let me get my crystal ball out. Most surveys that I see are back half of 2021 or 2022.
Yeah.
That's most of the data that I see on that. And I think that there are a few things in the mix there. One is marketers are results driven, right? We're actually seeing pretty positive results out of virtual events. Now, I do think virtual event fatigue is going to start to factor in, and so you're going to have to really differentiate your event or your event experience. But I think that we'll follow the results. We also have CFOs sitting over our shoulders saying, "Wow, you're still achieving some results, and you don't need 20% of your budget on live or in-person
Mhm.
events." So I think there's going to be a little bit of that when we start to look at ROI. But
Well,
kind of
share with the listener what you did at Bright Cove, because you did something very interesting in your pivot from
Mhm.
your annual customer conference.
Mhm. Yes. So, yes, we canceled our customer conference. Actually, it's funny because I refuse to use the word cancel because at the time I just felt like that was giving up. Um,
Yeah.
and we've had the play event for over, I think it's the 12th year was this
So
year, and so that
play just for my listener, play is was the name of your event. All caps
mhm,
play. That
all
was the name of the
caps.
event.
Yep, yep. It was all caps play. It was the industry's largest event around video. And so we ended up evolving. I called it an evolution because I refused to give up and say the word cancel. And what we decided to do was actually kind of look inside our own house and look at what technology we could use to have a conversation about video in an online space. And we ended up using our over the top streaming service called Brightcove Beacon and bring forward what we call Play TV. And so Play TV is a streaming service. It's app based. It serves up all kinds of content on trends in video, best practices, education. It's sort of the Netflix for the video industry. And so for us, Play TV was a great way to reach an audience that wanted content because we were hearing from our customers. They're saying, we still need to know what should we be doing with video right now. And so
Hmm.
we knew that there was a need for the content, but we wanted to bring it forward in a little bit of an innovative video first way. So for us, that was great. It ended up being a great way to reach audience, but also a great way to demonstrate our technology. And so
Hmm.
our sales teams are able to not just talk about the content with customers, but also use it as a demonstration of the technology. So, I'd really encourage marketers to sort of think about how can you use your own product or service in a way right now that's sort of demonstrating to your customers what innovation could look like. So I thought that was a really a neat way that the team came up with bringing that forward.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah,
Love that bit.
yeah. So it's I do think the event thing is different than 2008 because this happened in 2008, right? The economic crisis. I still remember the week in September when that all happened
Hmm.
and everything stopped, right? The world stopped buying, we stopped spending. Um,
Hmm.
there was, that next year, the whole conversation is there a demise of events because travel budgets were cut and marketing budgets were cut. But events came back. But I think that the technology is different now. And I think that the expectations are different. And I think the investment in digital and content marketing over the past 10 years is really going to take virtual events to the next level. So I think we'll come back to a hybrid approach and there still will be a level of in person, but I think it's going to be different.
Maybe even podcasting will take off. What do you think? This tiny
Podcasting,
little
I think it's
medium
gonna
here.
I think I think it's gonna take off. Well, and the marketing mix is gonna change, right? Even when events do come back, they'll come back maybe a little bit differently with hybrid. Um, and so if you think about where do you want to put your dollars today, I mean, I've seen an incredible amount of growth in digital content creation. I mean, consumption rates are going up astronomically right now in terms of content. I was actually just looking at a report from a colleague of mine at Path Factory, and they're seeing almost a sevenfold increase in content engagement
Hmm.
with people looking at assets for over 20 minutes. I mean, you can't get people to pay attention for 20 minutes at an event sometimes. So that's amazing, right? In terms of engagement and just the different formats that are out there, going beyond in B2B the traditional white paper. So social content, video content,
Hmm.
interactive content, podcasts, right?
Yep. Yep.
So it's not just visual, but it's you have auditory. And I think it's a great opportunity for brands to think about using their own assets. So think about what research you have. What insights do you have from your customers? How can you put forward benchmarking surveys? How do you invest in research and share that and use that as sort of thought leadership, but also to be helpful, right? To help inform the world and make sure that it's coming forward on a good website. Have a good
And that's a
digital
common
presence.
theme that I've seen a
Yeah.
lot of brands do, Sarah, where their focus is on being helpful, and
Hmm.
then they're leveraging their talents, their platforms, their technologies, their strengths to deliver that
Right.
helpfulness to the marketplace.
Right. That notion of being helpful was I think what a lot of marketers had that initial reaction. So there was that first reaction of I don't want to ambulance chase, and how can I be helpful right now? And I think that shifted what type of content was created. I think it shifted interactions with customers. One of the things we did is we actually offered free live streaming. So we saw all kinds of organizations, suddenly needing help to get online from your community theater to your church to schools to whatever. So we we created an offer for free live streaming. It said, throw us your feed, you get 50 hours of free HD live streaming. And
Hmm.
so to us, that was a great way to sort of one, it was a great way to be helpful. We met some incredible people along the way, but it was also a great way to kind of see what was going on in the market. What did people actually need right now? So sometimes being helpful actually will help you because you're going to find out more, right? So don't make assumptions. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
All right. Well, I'm anxious to get to your third pillar, but before we do that, Sarah, I just want to take a brief break here for a message from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Postal.io. a sales and marketing engagement platform that generates leads, increases sales, and improves customer retention. Postal allows you to automate and personalize your offline outreach to both existing customers and new prospects at scale. Learn how you can easily integrate direct mail, gifts, charitable donations, and even alcohol into your existing sales, marketing, and retention strategies. Visit postal.io today and request a demo so you can boost your pipeline and close more deals. All right, we're back. So let's get to point number 3, Sarah. What is your number 3?
Evolving talent needs. So I think every marketer always thinks about, what do I need to know next? And you think of, next year, in the next couple of years. Right now, it's, what do I need to know next week? And that's because things are changing so quickly. And I think things like moving to social, moving to digital, making sure that you're thinking about, your marketing technology and your analytics differently. All of those things we have thought about over the past several years, but now we suddenly are taking on, um, hyper importance because we're evolving, really quickly. I mean, I think some of the biggest impact I've seen, frankly, are on event roles and content roles. Um, and event roles being both the, people that, really just focus on events, but also field marketing as part of that, because field marketing tends to have a strong remit around events and customer events. And so, those roles I think are now looking at, what do I need to know next, and what do I need to learn next. So I look a little bit to, aligning with sales. If you were to think about, what is the buyer now doing, right? I saw some research recently from McKinsey that's talking about just this rapid evolution to e-commerce and self-service models in B2B. And I think there's been a notion that you have to have a face-to-face team, for larger deals. But this McKinsey research was talking about, especially in light of COVID, that over 70% of B2B buyers are open to self-service models, or online purchasing models for up to 50K.
Hmm.
70%.
Hmm.
That's a pretty big shift when you think about it. And over 27% would spend more than 500K, right? And so if you think about what that means to a marketer and a marketer's skill set, you've got to be thinking digital first. You've got to be thinking analytics.
I mean, I would send that over even to the sales team as well, Sarah, not just the
Hmm.
marketing team. When you talk about marketing and sales being aligned, the sales team also needs to be thinking that way and needs to be thinking in terms of how can they engage with their buyer online digitally, even before having a human to human conversation.
Hmm.
In fact, to earn that human to human conversation, because it's harder than ever before for that very point, right? That the
Hmm.
B2B buyer has access to so much content and information online that
Hmm.
they don't necessarily need to have that human to human conversation. In fact, there's a data point that I'll share. I believe it's from Gartner that says, and it was from this year, 2020, that the modern B2B buying committee, which is between 5 and 10 people, spends only 17% of their entire journey when they're on a journey to buy a solution. Only 17% of their time is spent talking with suppliers. So
Hmm.
that's 83% of their
Hmm.
time they're spending time doing other things on the buying journey, but
Yeah.
only 17% talking with suppliers.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, what they're doing is they're looking at your website. They're looking at peer reviews. They might be talking to the analysts. They are researching online. They might be going to your virtual events and listening to your customers, because that's the
Mhm.
content that most resonates usually, is customer content at events. And so you think about, in marketing organizations, the skills that are required. A lot of marketing organizations may have, a content director or a content team. Every single marketer is responsible for content now, because it's not just a factory over in the corner. We all have to be thinking about content and the touch points. We've got to be thinking about the creative around it, the writing around it, the visual display, or the audio of it, right? So for the podcast example, and there's a lot of different content types, but underlying that, the analytics. So, do you really understand the audience reception and the impact of your content? And those can't just be discrete roles. You have to have a mindset now around content.
Hmm.
When you think about the number that you just threw out there, 17% talking to sales. So that
Hmm.
means, most of the time you have to be bringing your voice forward through content. So I think that's, between that and figuring out this, um, this new event motion and the new event skills required, those are probably the two biggest shifts, I think, in talent in organizations. So, I mean, I really encourage marketing leaders, reassess your team skills. Talk to your team about where they want to grow. Be forward looking on the next gen capabilities of your team, and help your team reskill. Invest in online training. Invest in peer to peer mentoring, and that may mean advocating. Right, that may mean advocating to your management, to finance and the CFO, that we've got to invest right now. And there might be a little bit of a tendency to say, okay, we'll do that when things get better. But
Hmm.
things will get better for your company if you invest in the people that are going to be looking forward in the market, with
That's
you.
right.
So I'm a big advocate right now of ensuring that we invest and help our teams grow, because those teams that do that will be successful in these moments.
So, Sarah,
Yeah.
we're recording this, mid Q4 2020. So, may I assume that what you're describing here is what you really see going into next year, 2021, that
Hmm.
these are the trends that you're seeing into 2021?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that we'll continue to see these trends in 2021. The event pivot will continue, an evolution. It's now an evolution. We've moved beyond the pivot. The investment in digital, the investment in content, and the continuous need to reassess your buyer and your offering. Is your product or service relevant right now? Right? I mean, I love
Mhm.
these stories from kind of early on in COVID. You'd see, the bakery that had to close, but now they're meeting this need of packaging,
Right,
baking baked bread kits, right?
right.
Or the alcohol distillery that was all of a sudden pivoting, and now they're making hand sanitizer. And
Yeah,
so these are folks that said, "Look, I've got this stock in the back room, and I could use it differently to help with a market need right now." And so, having a little bit of that mindset, and continuously, reassessing, am I relevant right now?
yeah,
Because the world, this unfortunately, this COVID world is going to continue on for a little bit,
yeah, yeah.
right?
I would agree. I would
Yeah,
agree.
yeah.
Well, Sarah, I think
So,
that takes us to the point at which where I'm going to do my summary, or shall
mhm,
I say, I'll attempt to do my summary. And then I ask you to comment on anything you want to comment on and just kind of make a closing point, and then we'll ask you for your digital contact information and we'll bring the episode to a wrap.
great, perfect.
So, we began our conversation with a brief introduction to you and your impressive scar filled marketing executive background with roles at companies like IBM, SAP, Dassault Systems, and more recently CMO at Bright Cove, and how you said that what you've really seen across all those roles is transformation. And I like the point you made, Sarah, about how sometimes that transformation is planned and sometimes it's not, with events like 2008 and maybe 9/11, and of course, more recently, 2020 and COVID. And I love the way you said, if we're going to talk about pivoting, let's define it. And you said that it's a change to ensure short term survival and long term resilience and growth. And I think everything that you covered in terms of your three pillars really speaks to that. And you said the first of your three pillars is really asking, are you still relevant? Do your are your buyers still the same buyers? And is your product still the same product that you want to sell to that same set of buyers that you had in the past? And using the example of when you were at Brightcove, you said it used to be something you sold to people in IT and marketing, and then it shifted to the chief security officer. And that really required just being very good at listening to customers, listening to the sales organization, and really making sure that marketing and sales were aligned, but also product was aligned, that you know what you have, who you're selling it to, and how are you going to get it to market. And that marketing needs to be constantly studying the market and then leading that whole strategy. And you said it really boils down to just really understanding the changes in the buyer and conducting the market research to be able to make those decisions. You also made the point that if you don't have a customer advisory board, or CAB, as the acronym goes, start one. Or if you do have one, leverage it, because you can get some really valuable feedback from your customers. Then your second point was the marketing mix. And I love how you said it has fundamentally changed. Not just changed, it has fundamentally changed. And it happened quickly. As you said, we can almost all point to one date. For me, it was March 10th that everything changed. So we have to really look at how do we reach our audience? And the biggest areas that marketers have seen are around events. We went from these live events, like you at Brightcove, you had the annual customer conference play, and instead of doing the in person experience, you pivoted to a digital experience that really leveraged the platform that Bright Cove brings to the marketplace. And you built Play TV, and you called it a next Netflix for video, the video industry. And that really allowed you to just kind of build it on your product. And it was just a great communication program, and also a great demonstration of the technology, and how you really have to be thinking about how when you're thinking about the strategy, what is it that's unique to your company, your brand, your platform, your skills, and then use that to your advantage to evolve the marketing strategy. Again, the marketing mix has fundamentally changed. Then the third pillar that you discussed, Sarah, was evolving talent needs. As we are sort of exiting 2020 and coming into 2021, you said that really the two biggest areas are event roles, and content roles. And I don't think you're suggesting those are the only roles by any means, but in terms of really evolving marketing talent. So in the area of events, obviously that means putting on digital experiences, and then maybe finding ways, maybe in later 2021 and into 2022, where they're hybrid of digital and in-person events. And then also just content. You mentioned that buyers are spending more time consuming content, so the role of content in the marketing mix is more important than ever before. And you kind of close things up by saying, marketers really need to be investing in training now, not when things get better, but now, investing in digital, investing in content, and just always investing in the question, is your product still relevant? Do we still have the same buyer, or do we need to change things up to address the needs of the current buyer? So, Sarah, I'll leave my summary there and ask you to just add some additional commentary.
Well, first, Bernie, you said it a lot better than I did. So thank you for that summary. Second, I think I would add one more point, which is, right now, a skill all of us can over index on, I think, is empathy. And having empathy for your team, for your colleagues. Everyone's going through a lot right now. And as we move out of this short-term survival mode of the pivot and into the longer-term resilience and growth mode, having empathy, I think, will really help carry us through and get us to the other side of this. So that's what I try and live by on a regular basis. So I thought I would share that as well.
I think those are great thoughts and words to live by. Totally agree. Could not agree more. So thank you for adding that, Sarah. Where would you like to send my listener to connect with you online and just stay in touch with what you've got going on in your impressive marketing career?
Great. Well, if anyone wants to trade marketing war stories, you can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me, and happy to network with you or share and talk about any of these points further. I think right now, marketers have to build communities around each other and lift each other up. So happy to participate in that. And Bernie, can't thank you enough for what you're doing with your podcast to help us all keep moving as well.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. And for my listener, I will just say audibly here that your LinkedIn is your first name, last name, Sara Larsen, Larsen. And of course, my listener knows that we will link that up in our show notes page at vengreso.com. And Sarah, I want to thank you so much for, first of all, preparing. My listener doesn't see all the preparation that goes into this. I really appreciate the preparation that you put into this. Really awesome conversation. Even I said before we press record, I wish we had 2 hours. We had so much we could cover, but so I just want to thank you so much for bringing it all in about 30 minutes. It was awesome.
Great. Well, thank you, Bernie. Enjoyed our time together. Really appreciate what you're doing here.
Hey, don't forget to visit postal.io to learn how you can integrate direct mail and gifting into your existing strategy. Postal.io is a sales and marketing engagement platform that generates leads, increases sales, and improves customer retention. Hey, that's a wrap for this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. Hey, if you're not subscribed, I invite you to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast player so that you don't miss a single episode. And I'd love it if you give the Modern Marketing Engine podcast a rating or review in Apple Podcasts. That really helps others to discover it. You know, we publish a show notes page for each episode with links to the resources that were mentioned during the conversation. Just go to vengreso.com and navigate to the podcast menu. And while you're there, be sure to check out our Modern Selling podcast hosted by Vengreso's CEO, Mario Martinez Jr. Hey, are you following the Modern Marketing Engine podcast on the socials? We're active on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube. In fact, we publish each episode on YouTube for those who listen to audio content on YouTube. Hey, one last thing. If you and I are not connected on LinkedIn, I invite you to send me a personal invitation to connect. Now, please be sure to say that you're a listener of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. If you don't include a personal note, I have no way of knowing that that's how you found me. Hey, until next time, I wish you continued success on your modern marketing journey.